Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 7, Episode 26 of Music is Not a Genre, MxG. Title today is Tears for Fears, Let It All Out. I'm changing this up just a little bit, just because, okay, you're tuned in. You should probably already know what the title is because it's listed, wherever you're watching or listening. But I want to, grab you right away and let you know, yeah, that's what we're doing in case for some reason this just came on and you didn't know what the topic was, right? And that's because at the beginning of every episode, I have the housekeeping that I do, and I put it at the beginning because you're here and I want you to hear it because it's that important. And then, of course, we get right into the topic. So I'm just being completely upfront about this, literally upfront. And let's get to it. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening. Listeners, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdimatteo.com/musicisnotagenre. If you would rather not watch and wonder why I am wearing this sweater in the spring heat, you'll find out. Or maybe I'll forget to tell you. And everyone, go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band Rec, and everything I do. Of course, as I've been mentioning the last few weeks, I am offering songwriting coaching services. nickdimatteo.com/song coaching. If you are any kind of a songwriter, beginner, intermediate, expert, and you want to get those songs of the best possible quality in whatever genre, including recording even, if you want it, contact me there at nickdimatteo.com/song coaching, and I will help you out. And then last couple of things, Rec's new singles, Eat Salvation and Eat Salvation LR Remix, are streaming everywhere. Go to nickdimatteo.com/music, and you can follow and stream and wherever you want to go, or /discography, either one. And finally, and the reason I want you to go there also as well is because in the next week or two, there's another new Rec single coming out in anticipation of the release of Rec's album worldwide, KITE to Camden, which is coming June 20th. And finally, I am considering doing a live catch-up episode of this podcast in the summer. I'll be doing a regular catch-up episode in a couple of weeks, but I really love to have you guys on as guests again. If you're on patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, I will give you a link to join me live. Let me know what you want to talk about, old episodes, new episodes, upcoming episodes, suggestions for me, anything like that. Doesn't even have to be about music. I would love to have you on again, and I will let you know the date of that recording as soon as we find out who is participating. So now we can get to the topic, which of course is Tears for Fears, Let It All Out. That was a little better than take one that I did. Sounded a little bit less like, an old dude. Nevertheless, why am I doing a Tears for Fears episode? For some reason, people have been bringing them up more often. Now, of course, they've been in the news more often because they've been releasing more, new material and touring and all of that. But, in fact, case in point, Rec's new single, Eat Salvation, good friend of mine, she said it sounded like Tears for Fears, which it was not intended, but I love that anyway, and I get it because there's a kind of a theatricality and orchestration to it that does sound like Tears for Fears in hindsight. Also, MxG superfan Sean Hoke, who has suggested other episodes, said Tears for Fears is his favorite band. So I thought, what better way to honor a great fan than to do an episode on their favorite band? And honestly, I've been reinterested in Tears for Fears since The Tipping Point came out a couple of years ago, which I did review on a podfast right around when it came out. And all of this reminded me how important they were to 1980s music and to the development of that sound in general and my sound even to a degree. So I thought it was high time to give them a full episode. And of course, the subtitle, Let It All Out, refers to their incredible ability to span the range of emotions and ideas and still make catchy tunes that don't get overwrought and maudlin, at least for the most part. So I'm going to do, as usual, a history of the band, a discography, including solo material, conclusions, the featured song, and questions. And do not forget, at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, the bonus MXtra is why art pop is the most important music genre ever. So I'm saying, no uncertain terms, that art pop or art rock, that kind of stuff that Tears for Fears did, is actually the most important genre ever in music development. And if you tune in, patreon.com/music is not a genre for the bonus MxG, you'll find out why. Sources for this episode: Wikipedia, tearsforfears.com, playlists, sound.com, Bandcamp, and YouTube. Two disclaimers. This was my second time through the entire Tears for Fears catalog, not including their new songs. Though this time I included solo projects, side projects, which I hadn't done before. So that gave me a different perspective. And of course, I will be biased, as always, but I will do my best to tell you when I'm being biased and to be objective otherwise. So let's get into the history. Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith met as teens in the mid-1970s. Of course, from Britain, they formed a band, which was not called Tears for Fears, and wasn't called even the next name, which was Graduate in 1978. They formed that band and released one single and an album in 1980, and then broke up in 1981. At that time, they were also session musicians for the band Neon, which also broke up in 1981, and everyone in the band Neon went on to other successes. The prime movers of Neon, Pete Byrne and Rob Fisher, went on to form Naked Eyes, with the hits Always Something There to Remind Me and Promises, Promises. Neil Taylor and Manny Elias went with Tears for Fears, went with Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith to form Tears for Fears, and stayed with them for much of the 1980s. With Neil Taylor staying several years longer than Elias. So Neon, kind of a seminal band when you think about it. Inspired by a bunch of synth-heavy, new romantic, new wave, and post-punk artists like Gary Newman, OMD, Depeche Mode, Human League, and even Joy Division, Talking Heads, Peter Gabriel, and Brian Eno, they formed in 1981, this is the two main dudes, History of Headaches, which I love that title. I understand the name. I understand why they wouldn't keep that name, but somebody else should use it. Maybe the Tears for Fears tribute band calls themselves History of Headaches. No idea. But very quickly changed their name to Tears for Fears, inspired by Primal Scream Therapy, which now when you listen to their music, you totally get it. They were signed to Mercury off the strength of 2 demos and started working on an album right away. They released a couple of unsuccessful singles in 1981-82 and then released Mad World. Their debut album arrived in 1983. Through their 3 albums in the 1980s, they achieved increasing success worldwide, and of course talk in more detail about these in the discography, which is coming up soon. But then they had a fight after the 3rd album and broke up in 1991. As usual, I don't go into a lot of the personal stuff. That's not what this podcast is about. I try to keep it about the music, but I will mention it when it's relevant. Orzabal kept the band name in the 90s and released a single, then a hits collection, then 2 Tears for Fears albums, and a B-sides collection. And then the duo started talking again in 2000, something about a legal thing where they just happened that one asked another for a question about it, and they started talking, and they got back together, eventually releasing another album in that decade, a decade which gave them a resurgence in popularity in the 2000s. There was that famous cover, which I'll talk about later, etc. In the 2010s, they did quite a bit of touring, writing, some recording, including some cover tunes. The releases in the 2010s, which I'll get to in the discography, I really love. Though they slowed down a bit after Orzabal's wife died in 2017. Real tragedy there in so many ways. And then his own health issues related to that fallout helped to slow things down. They were still quite active, which, by the way, Orzabal remarried in 2020. He has 2 sons from the first marriage. And also, by the way, Kurt was married from 82 to 88, and then again from 1996 to the present, and has 2 daughters. So, which from that marriage. This all led to the comeback album in 2022, The Tipping Point, followed by a live album last year, which also featured new singles. They continue to tour and have dates scheduled through 2026 thus far. That is the history. Pause for a very loud slurp. Yeah. You people listening, you get all the good stuff, don't you? Let's get to the discography. And as I said, I'm going to include solo and side projects in a few select non-core albums. As you know, I don't get into the live stuff a lot unless there's something relevant there other than the fact that it's a live recording. So I'm actually going to start in 1980 with the album Acting My Age. Don't know it? That's because it's by their first band, Graduate or Graduate. I don't know which way that's pronounced. I'll have to call them up and ask them. It's very new wave and mod. It's kind of like Elvis Costello from that same period, and there's some ska in there too. And let's not forget that they were teens. They were both born in the early 60s, which means in 1980 they were still teens. And you can hear the songwriting coming along. All of the songs could use some editing, some shortening, but a very cool sound is developing. Very great production and very good performances. All in all, Acting My Age, worth listening to, and it is streaming because you get to hear where Tears for Fears sound kind of started. It was reissued in 2001 with extra tracks from their unfinished follow-up album Ambitions, which was never released. That's what's streaming. So the songs that I like, the opener, Acting My Age, very good. Probably the strongest. Sick and Tired, good song. Great synth solo. It's a Kurt Smith song. A little bit long for me, but otherwise very good. Ever Met a Day is the closest on this album to the Tears for Fears sound. I feel like it's where it started. It actually might be my favorite on the album, and it's the only one from this album I added to my playlist for the year. Ever Met a Day, and you'll understand why. There's a real kind of Beatles thing in there. The next song I like on the album is Shut Up. It's very Devo, which is cool. Elvis Should Play Ska was the single from the album. It's fine. It's not my favorite. Watching Your World sounds kind of like Joe Jackson from that period or XTC. It's not a fave because I like the Joe Jackson XTC stuff from that period better, but it's an okay song. Julie Julie is a really good song. Bad Dreams, final song on the actual album, is not a fave. But Ambition, which is the first from the unreleased album, you can already hear the sound changing and moving towards more drama. Bit of a morphing, kind of a mixture of Graduate and Tears for Fears. The next song I like from the unreleased album is Christ Look Upon Us. Too long, again, but very different, and their sound is expanding. More than anything, the second unreleased album seemed like a place they were experimenting with production, which, of course, became a huge part of the sound of Tears for Fears. So let's get to Tears for Fears. Finally, 12, 13 minutes in, The Hurting, 1983. Just an excellent album. It's an instant number one in the UK, but not a real breakthrough in the US. It only went to number 73, which is still great in my mind. It's less boppy, less mod than Graduate. More of the seriousness, both tone and subject, leaning more into ambient electro production. Just edges into the good production era for me. 83 still kind of skirts that. Good production era is one of my favorites. 78 to 82 or 3. And I love the meshing of the previous post-punky sound and the upcoming lusher sound. I don't think there are any weak songs on this album. I like all of them. I wonder where this ranks in my favorite albums. You will have to find out. And the conclusions, I rank all of Tears for Fears albums. And you will absolutely disagree with me. I know that because there are so many lists online that disagree with me. You've probably seen them. So side one, of course, the title track, The Hurting. Mad World was a Kurt Smith song and their first true classic. It's the third album single, and it was the only one to chart in the U.S. from this album at number 73. It was number 3 in the U.K. And that's the first time I might have heard this song was the famous early 2000s remake, because I didn't know Tears for Fears that well other than their hits until I decided to re-listen more recently. So when that amazing kind of very, ambient slow cover came out of Mad World in the early 2000s, I was like, oh my God, this is a great song. And then subsequently found out it was a Tears for Fears song. It's kind of funny. Didn't know it was a cover, just like I mentioned in the episode a couple weeks ago on covers. Pale Shelter re-recorded second single, released as the 5th single, and went to number 5 in the UK. My stealth fave on the album is Ideas as Opiates. Great song. Going to side 2, Suffer the Children, is the first single off the album, was also re-recorded. And then another one I like, Change, was the 4th single, number 4 in the UK. Actually, I don't think it's a fave. I just mentioned that it's a single. And then there are 10 total tracks, and I tend to only mention the ones I like. You can always look up what the track listing is. The non-album single, The Way You Are, released also in 83, went to number 24 in the UK, and it is okay. Which brings me to The Big Chair. Songs from The Big Chair, 1985. Number 1 album in the US and number 2 album in the UK. This is where the bias comes in. It's very hard for me to judge this objectively because it was everywhere in my teens. So my emotions immediately kick in. Very hard. When I hear a song, forget it. I can't really judge it. It's crazy there are only 8 songs on the album, although you get it with how long their songs are. You understand why. They were really spreading their art pop wings, which again, by the way, bonus M extra. Art pop, most important genre ever. Patreon.com/music is not a genre. There are some clear all-time classics on this album, absolutely, and some of my all-time favorite songs. But it suffers for me because 85 was not a great year for production values, as far as I'm concerned, for most artists. Though they were the best representation of how mid to late 80s production can go right. It was still mid to late 80s production. So side 1, Shout, second single, first in the US, number 1, number 4 in the UK. Love that song. Another one, of course, Working Hour, not a fave. Everybody Wants to Rule the World was the third single. Their second US number 1, number 2 in the UK. My cover band performs this one. I take the backup vocals on this, which was actually Orzabal doing backup, Kurt Smith doing lead, and I also played the keys for it. Mother's Talk was the first single, number 14 in the UK, non-charting in the US. I love the vibe of Mother's Talk. Starting Side 2, I believe, was the 5th single, number 23 in the UK. Is not a fave. Broken, it's cool because it's basically a lead into the next song. It has the key riff of the next song, some of the same end of the next song, some of the same lyrics, and the next song, of course, being Head Over Heels / Broken Live, okay, which I didn't know. I think the single was cut differently. It was the 4th single, number 12 in the UK, number 3 in the US. And right now, at this point in time, it's my favorite song on this album. And if I'm thinking back, I feel like even then it was. I mean, I loved the other 2 singles, of course, but there was something about this particular song that I liked even more. And then ends the album with Listen. Non-album singles, the Mother's Talk US remix went to number 27 in the US. This has elements of a quintessential 80s remix with those keyboard horn hits like Trevor Horn, but it's actually a full re-recording of the song. It's not really a remix, just redone, reproduced, which I love to do. Everybody Wants to Run the World, 1986, was reworked from the obvious song for the Sport Aid charity campaign. Never heard of it, but it was also organized by Bob Geldof, who did Band Aid and Live Aid. Again, those keyboard horns. And they do not improve the song. I applaud them for doing something for charity, but the original was much better. And then in 1986, a little sidestep, a band called Man Crab released a single called Fish for Life on the Karate Kid 2 soundtrack. And that was Orzabal and Stanley, who was the keyboardist for them throughout the 1980s, and lead vocals by Eddie Thomas. Great lead vocals, but don't like the songs. Way too typical mid-80s. This and the above non-album singles make me very happy and sad to say that Tears for Fears took off most of the late 80s because the production, it's not streaming as well. You have to go to YouTube to hear Fish for Life, which brings me to the last album of their kind of classic period, you would say. Although I differentiate it slightly differently, I guess, and that is, I say The Hurting is its own thing. I say Songs from the Big Chair, Seeds of Love, and the next album, I think Elemental, are actually of a piece. And then on and on, each of the other albums are kind of singular, even though Elemental was not both of them. We'll get to that in a second. But we call this the classic period because it's right before Kurt Smith left. The Seeds of Love, 1989. It went to number 1 in the UK and number 8 in the US. Again, only 8 songs. Their sound was expanding in ways both very good and a little meh. You know, the jazzy elements here, they don't do it for me, although, again, I applaud them for going in that direction. I love that they really explored those song structure and production. That's one of my favorite things to do, and I love that they were doing it. That's one of the reasons why I liked them so much, is that they're a real, of course they're a live band. My wife saw them live a couple years ago, and they killed. Even to this day, they're a great live band, but they're a studio band at heart. You know they are. And that's why I admire them expanding their sound. But honestly, all the songs on this album, too long. Even the singles, a little too sleepy for me. Wish there was a little more oomph and energy, which they would eventually get back. First song, Woman in Chains, was the second single, number 26 in the UK, 36 in the US. It featured Oleta Adams with great co-lead vocals. I vaguely remember this song, even though it's not a fave. Badman's song, more Oleta, again, not a fave. Sowing the Seeds of Love, first single, number 5 in the UK, number 2 in the US. I mean, a top fave of mine, of their songs. Just probably top 5 for me. Love this song. Clearly inspired in part by I Am the Walrus and other Beatles stuff. An effective pastiche of Beatles ideas with 80s aesthetics and new ideas brought to the mix. It honestly should have been way more cloying with a title and a chorus like that, but they made it work 100%. That's what I say, let it all out. Their ability to convey these ideas and emotions and not make them cloying and maudlin was second to none, to be honest. Advice for the Young at Heart was the third single, number 36 in the UK, 89 in the US. Not a bad song, but not a fave. And then skipping down to the last song on the album, the ones in the middle, not faves. Famous Last Words was the fourth single, number 83 in the UK, did not chart in the US. Sweet sound. I love the sound of it, but don't love the song. There was a non-album single released in 1991, 2 years later, called Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams. And originally a B-side of Advice for the Young at Heart, number 70 in the UK and nothing charting in the US at all. It's basically, to me, a rap version of Sowing the Seeds of Love. And the rap and the singing by Biddy Strauchen, I don't know if that is pronounced correctly, Bististrauchen. Look her up. I believe she teaches at the New School now, which is very cool. And an interesting development in production for Tears for Fears, and honestly, a much tighter sound than most of the previous 2 albums. And that was the last song released in their, from their classic period, let's say, and it ends the first phase of Tears for Fears. Breakup in 1991. For the next few releases, the band was Roland Orzabal's solo project, and what also happened is Kurt Smith started his solo career. So we're going to get to all of those things. Next release in 1992 was Tears Roll Down, greatest hits 82 to 92. The only thing of note on this is the previously unreleased song Laid So Low, in parentheses, Tears Roll Down. It was the first song released by Tears for Fears that was only Roland Orzabal. And it was number 17 in the UK as a single and not at all in the US. I like this song a lot. Nice break from the mid to late 80s sound. And it picks up some of the energy from The Hurting that seemed to peter out in the 2 subsequent albums. And then in 1993, Elemental was their next proper release. It went to number 5 in the UK and number 45 in the US, which, considering the fact that they weren't anywhere in the, zeitgeist, used it a second time, they still charted in the US. Overall, an infusion of energy and a refresh of their sound, but still kind of a piece with the previous 2 albums. As I mentioned when I was breaking up the albums into sections, Roland's vocals are absolutely great all around. Beginning and end of the album is much stronger than the middle, but it's more listenable through and through for me as an album than the previous 2 albums. Again, I'm not saying I love these songs more than, songs from The Big Chair and all those songs from that album. But as far as a listening experience, I prefer Elemental through and through. In fact, Elemental was the 4th single, did not chart. Nice sound, if anything. Cold was the 2nd single, charted number 72 in the UK. One of my favorite songs on the album, Cold. Break It Down Again, though. Number 20 in the UK and 25 in the US. Loved it then, love it now. I was so happy to hear this song in 93. It really lifted my spirits. I loved everything that was going on in 93, but this was a nice break from that. And then a bunch of songs in the middle I don't love. And then Brian Wilson said, really, really nice. And yes, 100% sounds like a Brian Wilson song. And yet somehow not over the top. Again, they don't go over the top, even though they surely could. One of my faves on the album. And then Good Night Song, third single, went to only number 125 in the US and was not released in the UK. Very nice. Very nice. I actually love this song, but I don't know why. I remember it really well. I don't know why. I never owned this album. And if it was only 125 in the US, where was it played so much that I would have remembered it that well? I don't know. It happens sometimes. Same year, tit for tat, Kurt Smith released his solo debut album, Soul on Board. That's S-O-U-L for you shoe fetishists. Not streaming at all. Pretty sleepy album. Production, to me, sounds a little dated. Very respectable overall, but not impactful to me. Favorite songs on here, number 2, Calling Out was the first single, and it was a very good song and could have been on a Tears for Fears album. You can see the through line there. Number 4, Wonder Child is not a bad song either, and that's honestly the only 2 songs in the album that really struck me. Which brings us to 1995 and the next proper Tears for Fears album, and that is Raul and the Kings of Spain, which went to number 41 in the UK, number 79 in the US. So it still did chart, even though they weren't anywhere in the collective consciousness of the US. It's pushing forward the sound even more. Overall, a really strong album, an underrated album. How many lists have put this down? I say that Raul and the Kings of Spain is a little stronger than Elemental by a nose, but you'll see where it ranks when you stick around for my conclusions, is when I rank all of Tears for Fears albums. Very good vocals again, and a very personal album for Roland, whose birth name was Raul, and he gave that name to his firstborn son, Raul. By this album, both of his sons had been born, so you can see why maybe more of the personal feeling was coming out. And again, as usual, I don't agree with critics. Many critics rank this low. This to me was a standalone sound-wise. It's just the way The Hurting was. There's no other album of Tears for Fears like this one, and that's great to my mind. Songs I like, well, first of all, Raul and the Kings of Spain was the first single. It was a decent song, number 31 in the UK only. The chorus, though, is far better than the verses to me. Number 2, Falling Down was the 4th single, which didn't chart. I like this song a lot. Secrets was the 3rd single, also did not chart. Very nice power ballad, but not a fave. God's Mistake was the 2nd single, number 61 in the UK, number 102 in the US. And for that reason, it's the only one from this album that I remember, probably because it did chart in the US, and it's a very good song, one of my favorites. Number 5 is Sketches of Pain. So nice, acoustic, love it. Leans into Spanish, which I love. Los Reyes Católicos was beautiful. Sorry, love that song, so not sorry. And then there's a bunch of other songs that are decent on the album, not my faves. Of the extra tracks on the reissue, the only one I really like is Until I Drown. Check that out. Check the extended play version of this. Check it out. We're going to do one more album before the break, and that is Saturnine, Marshall, and Lunatic from 1996. Why don't you know it? Because it's not a proper Tears for Fears album. It's a B-Sides and Rare Tracks album. It has things like Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams Fluke remix. It has The Big Chair, which was sort of the title track of the big album, but didn't show up on the album. It was a B-side. Very interesting electro-minimalist thing, which, by the way, the featured song leans in the direction of electro-minimalist. That's why I chose it. One of the reasons I chose it. Schrodinger's Cat, nice song, like it. My Life in the Suicide Ranks, minimalist, haunting. I would love to have heard more of this minimalist side of Tears for Fears. So that's why I like a lot of these minimalist things, even though I like the big stuff too. And then another one I like is New Star. Could have been a single as far as I'm concerned. Very, very good. The Ashes to Ashes, the remake of the Bowie song, really nice and really faithful to the original, but still, Roland's vocals just great. Empire Building experimental electronica, like the song The Big Chair, but even more concise than that, and I really, really like it. And I feel like this is the perfect place to take a break before we get into some more solo projects and Tears for Fears albums. So stick around for about a minute, and I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Music is Not a Genre. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, if you'd like to learn more about the music I do with my band Wreck or any other projects or anything else about me, go to nickdematteo.com. That's Nick, DEMATTEO.com. And everything is there. There's even a link to a merch store where you can get t-shirts and mugs and hats and totes and notebooks and so many other things. I'm always adding new products there. Great way to support the podcast. And finally, go to patreon.com/music is not a genre if you really like to show your support. My fans and lovely family there get exclusives and other perks and early releases, and they get to suggest topics for future podcasts as well. Thanks for listening to the Midroll. Now back to the show. All right, we are back from Midroll City. So as promised, I didn't forget. Why am I wearing this sweater? If you look at the album... Oh, man, is it the album cover of Songs from the Big Chair, I believe? I don't know. It's with the two of them, and it's like from chest up. They're wearing stuff that looks a lot like this, and so that's why I picked it. I don't have a lot of clothes. I try to pick things that are appropriate for each topic, and this is what I came up with. You're welcome. Let's get right back into the discography. So we left off at 96. In 1998, Mayfield was released. It was the name of the band that was a side project of Kurt Smith with Charlton Pettis, who worked a lot with Tears for Fears, co-wrote stuff, etc. They started this band after Kurt moved to New York, where I am right now, and it's a play on the name Curtis Mayfield. So Mayfield's the name of the band, Kurt Smith, and it's Kurt is Mayfield, because it was really his band. So it's kind of a cool reference as well, and there is some of that kind of R&B feel to it in spots. It starts, to me, with way more energy and interesting production than Kurt's first solo album. Overall, very, very strong, if a bit samey and draggy in the middle, but again, great vocals. One thing you got to say about both Tears for Fears dudes, excellent vocals all the time. But I only found this on YouTube. It is absolutely worth looking up, though. Songs I like, What Are We Fighting For? Sounds like Beatles mixed with XTC mixed with Tears for Fears. It is an excellent song. Maybe his best solo song. Sorry Town, similar to that. Quirkier, though, and also really good. And then a few of the others I like, Snow Hill, I Don't Want to Be Around, and Sun King. No, it was not the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun King. Then in 1999, the following year, Kurt Smith's proper solo album number 2 came out called Aeroplane. And it's interesting because Mayfield is technically not a solo album for him, but basically this is the same album with just the title track added, which I also really like the title track. And there's an acoustic version of Everybody Wants to Rule the World as well. So again, the songs I like are the same. Add on Aeroplane as a title track as a song I like. And, Everybody Wants to Rule the World is a very jazzy, or acoustic version, followed by Snow Hill, jazzy version, which that's fine. It's of no consequence, but I'm glad he did it. And then in 2000, 20th Century Masters, the Millennium Collection, the best of Tears for Fears. Little too few songs, but a decent introduction if you don't know the band. Maybe not the one, though. We'll get to that. Shout, the very best of Tears for Fears in 2001, was a little better than the previous, but still not the best. And then you get Tomcats Screaming Outside in 2001. Didn't know existed. It's Orzabel's only solo album, not under the name Tears for Fears, if you understand what I mean. And I believe he did it that way because at this point, they had gotten back together. So he didn't want to call this a Tears for Fears album, and that makes total sense to me. Also, it is a departure from the Tears for Fears sound. A very nice one, too, and an update of the production. It's more indie rock. It's darker. It is very strong. I love this album. It is not streaming. Look for Tomcats Screaming Outside on YouTube, I suppose is where I found it. Again, great vocals. I keep saying it, but it's true. And both as big and more subtle than any previous, which to me is a development. So as a musician, as a songwriter, as a production, whatever, a performer, you start out with an imbalance unless you're a genius. Everybody starts out with some type of imbalance to where your bigs might be too big, your smalls are too small, the balance of the two is a little off, etc., etc. And as you develop, you learn how to modulate that to where your bigs are as big as they need to be, and the subtle stuff is even more subtle, and somehow you get it all to work together and make it of a piece, whether it's in one song or spread out over an album. And that's what this album does. Tomcat Screaming Outside. Some of my favorites. Ticket to the World is almost like a mute math song. It is a funky, trippy, hard song, and I love it. Low Life was the first single. Very strong, very energetic, great production. It's not a top fave, but a strong song. Another one I like, Bullets for Brains. If Tears for Fears and Duran Duran had merged by the late 1980s, you would have gotten this song, Bullets for Brains. Intriguing enough to find? Go find it. Bullets for Brains, Roland Orzabal. And then skipping down, another song I like, Dandelion. Damn good song. It sounds like Oasis meets Afghan Wigs. And it was so much like that it reminded me of the name of that band, even though I'd forgotten about them. Next one, Hey Andy, is ambient drum and bass. And I always love drum and bass. It's cool. It's not a favorite song, but it's cool. Number 10, Kill Love. More drum and bass. Great build. Again, not a fave, but I like that he went there. I believe he said this album was supposed to be a lot more of that. And even though I was intrigued to hear more of it, now that I hear these two songs, I'm like, that was probably enough. And then the final song, Maybe Our Days Are Numbered. Nice, haunting ending. Really nice. A couple years later, The Collection in 2003. It was a UK release. Has some redundancies from the previous collections, but also some different selections, and it is still not the best collection to me. Everybody Loves a Happy Ending in 2004. What is that? That is the next Tears for Fears album, and it is their reunion album, and it is their comeback album since it was 9 years that they had released an album under the Tears for Fears name. It went to number 1. No, it didn't. I'm sorry. It was comeback album number 1, and you'll understand what I mean by that when we get to the second comeback album. And it's the start of a different phase. This is phase 3 as far as the personal lives there. So you have the 80s was phase 1, the 90s was phase 2. This was the beginning of phase 3. But again, this stands a standalone album. It is another sound refresh. It doesn't sound like any of the previous albums. And it's, the first with Kurt Smith since Seeds of Love, Sowing the Seeds of Love. Cool range of production, and overall, I love the sound. I'm going to guess that this is probably another underrated album, and screw the idiots who only live in an artist's halcyon days. I'm sorry if you're one of those people, because I understand. Because let's say U2 is one of my favorite bands. There are songs of theirs from way back that will always hit me harder. And yet, there are songs from every single album they've done that I would put into my faves, because that's the kind of person I am, it's the kind of listener I am, it's the way I absorb music. If you are a true fan of a band, you will do the same thing. If the only phase of a band you like is one phase, you're not a real fan of the band. You're a fan of that phase, and that's fine. But if you say Tears for Fears, best stuff, hands down, nothing else was as good, was the 80s, then I don't feel like you are a great fan. Even though you may say those are your top favorite. I'm not saying they shouldn't be your favorites. What I'm saying is if you say all of the other albums sucked and every song on every album sucked, then you're not a real fan of Tears for Fears. And I say this because I think Everybody Loves a Happy Ending is a damn strong album, and you will see how it ranks for me in the conclusions. It still has the art pop range and exploration of all the previous albums, but it gets to the point more. It's more concise. And I have said more and more, and I'll say in the conclusions, the length of Tears for Fears songs has a lot to do with the fact that they were doing art pop, which again, bonus MXG on patreon.com/music is not a genre. Why is art pop the most important genre ever? But they could go long, right? And in this case, they didn't go long. And I think there are no weak songs in the album, which I've only said once before. And here are my faves. Everybody Loves a Happy Ending. Cool opening, Britpop, sweet, love the changes. It was the second single. It went to 102 in the UK. Closest Thing to Heaven, Simply Red in the 2000s is what this sounds like to me, in a good way, in a great way. It was the first single, and it actually went to number 40 in the UK, a top 40 in the UK. Call Me Mellow, double A-side of the second single, and a top fave. Call Me Mellow. Size of Sorrow I like. Who Killed Tangerine? Beatles' Late Period mixed with Radiohead and others. Another top fave. I don't know why I know this song. I don't remember hearing this album at all in 2004, but I know this song and I like it a lot. And like I said, no weak songs, but another fave, Secret World. Sounds like solo McCartney mixed with Hall & Oates. Imagine that. Intriguing? Secret World. Tears for Fears, go look it up. Killing with Kindness is like Pink Floyd meeting Stone Temple Pilots. I can't imagine there's a lot of crossover in fans between Pink Floyd and Stone Temple Pilots, including me. I actually prefer the latter. Although I do like quite a bit of Pink Floyd's major songs. Killing with Kindness is like them mixed together. Final song's Last Days on Earth. Nice, trippy R&B ending. Love it. 2 years later, in 2006, they released their first official live album, Secret World Live in Paris. Also notable, and the reason I'm bringing it up, for 2 unreleased tracks, not on streaming. Floating Down the River. It's like if Graduate, their first band, and The Hurting merged with R&B, you get this song. Love it. Absolutely love it. It should be on streaming. What Are We Fighting For? Originally on Mayfield, but performed by them. Still good here. So I guess really just one new song, because Floating Down the River, the What Are We Fighting For? It was the same exact recording. There's a re-edited Secret World released as a single. So really we just one new song. And also that same year, Gold, 2006. To me, this is the best collection. 2-disc set, 24 songs. Look it up, Gold, if you want to start Tears for Fears. And then in 2008, Halfway, Pleased, Kurt's third solo album. It has a very solo project sound. Intimate electro, like so many solo albums were then and often have been. When you think of like... what's the dude's name from Soundgarden whose name is blanking me? Chris Cornell, like that kind of a thing. Even Weiland's solo stuff. Just guys who were like, well, I need to differentiate it from the band, which is hard rocking, so let me go intimate electro. But I only found it on Bandcamp. That said, it's a good sound. I like it. But the only songs I really like are Aeroplane, which is a redo of the previous version, and Who You Are, which is minimalist, haunting, affecting electro goodness. And then skipping ahead, they were touring a lot, not recording a lot. In 2013, Kurt released his 4th solo album and his most recent, called Deceptively Heavy. More intimate solo stuff. So I get Deceptively. Doesn't sound heavy. But if you listen closely, there are heavy things about it. Very nice sound. It's a little less sleepy than the previous solo album, but still a little bit too much in the vein of, I'm mature now, so I need to keep it down. One of the developments in artists that I hate, because I don't care how old you are, you can go as big or as small as you want, but don't think because you're mature you need to quote-unquote sound mature. It's nice, a nice album, though, and again, I only found it on Bandcamp. Songs I like from it: Beautiful Failure, Hold It Together, co-lead vocals by Karina Round, an English singer-songwriter. Nice, cool helicopter rhythm thing, like that kind of a thing. And then another song I like from it is Mannequin, kind of a nice 80s R&B throwback mixed with trippy Brit rock, is what I wrote here in my notes. And then that was the solo. Ready Boy and Girls from 2014 was the next Tears for Fears release, but it was an EP, and it was cover tunes. I love how far afield electro weird they went here, and the selections of cover tunes are great. The first one I love is My Girls, which is from Animal Collective. It's just great electro. Ready to Start, which is the Arcade Fire song, which is nice as well. The slow string electro goes into drum and bass, and it goes into unexpected places. Those are the two I prefer off of this EP. They also did a Hot Chip cover, and I Was a Boy from School, which is very nice, but not the other two are my faves. Again, you gotta listen to what they sounded like in 2014 and in the teens in general. Rule the World, the Greatest Hits 2017. It's the updated version of their first hits album from 1992 and includes 2 new songs, one of which is Stay, and eventually ended up on the tipping point. The other, I Love You But I'm Lost, was released as a single but did not chart. Actually, a really good song. I Love You But I'm Lost. I believe it is streaming, so look it up. Which brings us to their second comeback album, The Tipping Point, from 2022, which rekindled my interest in the band. And it is another sound refresh, so stands alone. I love how they morph. I love how they change. In many ways, it's even bigger and better than the first comeback album, even though I love that 2004 album, and you will not know where I rank my albums unless you stick around to the conclusions. Note that many singles were released from this, but none of them charted. Just so you know, and I will mention which are. Songs I like, No Small Thing, such a nice, intimate opening. It was the second single. The Tipping Point was the first single, really cool throwback. Love it. Long Time is just one of my top 2 or 3 faves from the album, and it was the 5th single. Break the Man, though, that's my top. Break the Man is what brought me back into the band as their 3rd single from this album. My Demons, it's almost like Depeche Mode, with an amazing Roland Orzabal vocal, and is the 4th single, and I love it. And some others I like are Master Plan, real, Beatles. They have to have at least one song that it sounds like the Beatles later period on every one of their albums, and more or less. And they did that here, but they did it well. And this is a top 3 for me on the album. And then End of Night is excellent as well. And the aforementioned song from the hits collection, Stay, closes out the album. And then last year, 2024, they released Songs for a Nervous Planet, live album, but it includes 4 new tracks. I love that they are still putting out new material. I love that they are still touring. I hope I get to see them the way my wife did with her sister. All but track 3 of the 4 were released as singles. None of them charted. All good songs, but to me, a bit retready from the previous. I mean, it does sound like maybe these were alternate songs or B-sides or whatever. It was things that, were left off the album because they wanted to keep it to 10 or whatever it is. To me, not as strong. That said, the 2 songs I like are Emily Said and Astronaut, which was their 2nd single. And just, The Girl That I Call Home was their 1st single, and Say Goodbye to Mom and Dad was their 3rd single. And that concludes the discography and all the things they've released thus far. I look forward to what other singles and albums they will release. I guarantee you they're going to come up with something because they're still going strong. Some conclusions. Despite a pretty big break for the duo, as a band or a name or as musicians releasing music, I will say that, they have been really consistent. And with touring in the last 20-some years, very consistent. Still excellent performers to this day. Great vocals, amazing, wide-ranging body of work. That is absolutely true. And they haven't just tried to recreate their heyday sound. Even when they harken back to it, they add new things to it. I love any artist who doesn't stay in one lane, whether it's their own lane or someone else's or a phase of their career. They keep exploring and experimenting. And that, to me, stems from their rabid studio exploration. It started as far back, I think, as the shift from Graduate to Tears for Fears proper. You can hear them already starting to do that. They never settled on one sound, even though their 2nd through 4th albums were of a piece, as I've mentioned. I wish they'd explored more of the sound they were cultivating in the teens, in the 2010s. I told you about that with the cover tunes and that standalone single, trippy electro, which is related to some of the trippier stuff that they have done, but with an edge. It's different from everything they've ever done, and I hope they bring back some of that energy in their next stuff. They are not a heart artist for me. They're a heart artist for Sean Hoke, and thank you for suggesting this tacitly. I wouldn't say they're not on my list of heart artists, but I've always had tons of respect for them and lots of love for them. And I'm sure they've influenced me, which I'll get to soon. And also, their singles and some of their non-singles are favorites of mine. If I'm like most people, I tend to associate Tears for Fears more with Roland Orzabal. He always seemed to be the front man. but it's important to note how equal a duo it's always been anytime they worked together. So, notwithstanding the 90s. And that Kurt Smith wrote and sang some of the biggest and best stuff. I mean, when I found out a few years ago that he sang Everybody Wants to Rule the World, it surprised me because he actually sounds quite a bit like Roland Orzabal, maybe just a smoother tone. It's kind of like with the Cars, where we all tend to think of Rick Ocasek as the main singer-songwriter, and he was the main songwriter, but Benjamin Orr sang several of their hits. It's a very similar thing, but you think of the other guy as the main dude. I'm of two minds about their writing and arrangement, okay? And you've heard some of this throughout this episode. A, they could have used some serious editing. I'm not somebody who needs a section to flesh out every last idea. I'm more like, state the idea in the most developed way you can, and then move on to the next part of the song. Now, Pink Floyd and other bands like that, and a lot of Tears for Fears, they explore more of that sound for longer. So, for example, if you're a writer and you understand what I mean, or a producer, if you're doing a section and it's 8 bars, because in your head you're like, no, it has to be. When you listen back, the editor in you might say, you know what, it only needs to be 4 bars. And that's a better song when you do that. And I feel like that could have happened more. But B, of two minds, the fact that they could make long-form pop like that work is a testament to their skill and to the integrity of the songs. Most bands who would do songs that were 5-6 minutes long could not make them work the way Tears for Fears have done. And also their ability to artfully and effectively convey a range of ideas and emotions, as I mentioned at the beginning, and still be hooky and poppy. Not many bands can do that. Not many writers and producers can do that. And again, not getting too treacly, too maudlin, too heavy-handed. And it's in part because the lyrics come from deep personal truth. And they weren't just meant to be affecting. Few, if any, bands of the 80s, honestly, did both of those things equally well. Ultimately, one of the best British bands of the 1980s and have proven their longevity in every decade since. Which brings me to the thing you've all been waiting for. I'm ranking their 7 primary albums. This is how I usually do it. I judge the album as a listening experience. On the whole, not the individual songs, which usually means, with me, my favorite songs are not on my favorite albums very often, which I think is cool. It just shows how strong an artist is. But it's also a testament to the kind of listener I wish all of you would be, which is find the good stuff everywhere. And don't overjudge something as great because everybody says it is. Don't underjudge something as terrible because everybody says it is. If you are a rabid fan of Tears for Fears, you're not going to like me. If you're a critic, you're not going to like me for this ranking. Here you go. Brace yourselves. And I love all these albums. I'm not going to say any of them, all of them are strong, all of them are good. I want to put that as a disclaimer up front. But that said, my bottom album, number 7, is Elemental. It was more like the rest of the previous 2 albums, but not quite as strong. Number 6 is Sowing the Seeds of Love, because I just couldn't get down with the production and the songs were a little too long. Stronger than that was Songs from the Big Chair, and yes, I'm putting this at number 5, even though it contains some of my favorite songs. Again, with only 8 songs, and the way, just as a listening experience to me, as an album, it drags just a little bit. You're going to hate me. Number 4, Raul and the Kings of Spain. I said it was underrated, and I meant it. Nice departure and very good. Number 3, which I debated on this, is actually The Tipping Point, their most recent album. Super strong album. And I would have put it higher if I hadn't listened to all the others, because number 2 for me is absolutely 100% Everybody Loves a Happy Ending. That is a massively underrated album, deserves a re-listen, deserves to have some of those songs ended up on my playlist for the year. I love that album, but you got to give number 1 to The Hurting. You got to. That to me it was crisp and dramatic. It was all the songs punched in and punched out for the most part. It had the energy of the post-punk, but the drama of the art pop, come on. That's why it's at the top for me. And one more keynote, by the way. Art pop, You want to know more about it, of course, bonus M extra, patreon.com/music is not a genre. I tell you why it's the most important genre ever. It's been around at least since the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and it has proto-origins even before that. And you'll learn more about it in the bonus. Their ability to incorporate sounds, styles, and production values beyond pop, rock, and new wave and achieve major success from it was unparalleled. Lots of people can do art pop like Tears for Fears, but not chart the way they did. Or you do less art pop and chart even more like a Duran Duran, let's say. And the one charting less, an example would be XTC. Charted more in the UK, of course, but they have more of a cult following. And again, you want to hear more about art pop, I talked about the bonus M extra. All right. Tears for Fears kind of art pop was a huge influence on me. How they combine their new wave electro elements with rock and pop and broader ideas, both musically and lyrically, and still made pop songs with hooks. That is what I do, all of that. So the featured song, which is from Rec's new album, Kite to Camden, which is on Bandcamp, recarea.bandcamp.com, going to be released worldwide June 20th. That album is art pop. Kite to Camden, Rec's Kite to Camden is art pop. Its arc includes so much from so many disciplines and genres, and it all works together, but it's so disparate and just, genre rich and sound rich. Some of the songs are more straightforward, while others really lean into the artiness. Thing is, I've already featured so many songs from this album, and I don't really like to repeat myself. In fact, the featured song from a couple weeks ago, Eat Salvation, Rec's new single, is the one where my friend said sounds like Tears for Fears. So look that up. I'll probably include the link to that one too, just so you can kind of hear that. It has the emotion, it has the drama, the orchestration of many Tears for Fears songs, even though I don't think it particularly sounds like them, but I love that she thought it did. But since I just featured that, I'm going with one that explores the artier side of the Tears for Fears canon, that minimalist electro side that you didn't hear much of, that still was art pop, was Tears for Fears. My featured song is called Linear B, Other Side. It is track 2 on Kite to Camden. It is absolutely art pop, even though it is mostly an instrumental. It's also the only song on the album that features a British accent. Ask me later why I did that. It indulges in weird, quirky instrumental flavor before bringing in the vocals, which are sparse, but repetitive and build. It's both impressionistic and funky and hooky. There's room to breathe and explore the idea that I'm laying forth, and yet it's only 2.5 minutes long. It's a way I like to do. Punch in, punch out. So consider it my idea of Tears for Fears. Arty and pop leaning, but more concise. Stay tuned. In the next minute or so, you get to hear it, or just go and click the link now and you get to hear it. Questions for you. Are you a Tears for Fears fan? Or do you just know their hits? Did you listen and explore more beyond the hits, and what did you think? What are some of your favorite Tears for Fears songs and albums? And how much of their recent music do you know? I would love to know the answers to all these, because as always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for this fun episode, and I will talk to you next week.